Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Unmatched Adventures, the 1 to 4 player solo co-op mode that is an add-on to the existing Unmatched series. And no disclaimer for this one, my buddy let me borrow his copy. I tend to love card-based dueling games exceed being my favorite. How does Unmatched Adventures do with a solo co-op formula? Let's find out and get to the list. So my number 5 point is focused on the difficulty in the game and the event deck, and this is a bit of a mix for my taste. So the game can be pretty swingy. I'll talk about the many elements of randomness later in the review. Sometimes you can just go straight to the boss's face and win very quickly. I've had games that were totally anticlimactic. Sometimes based on the luck of the draw with the cards, it could be incredibly tough. And they try to mitigate and balance that a little bit with these event cards. You can draw 1 to 3 of them at the start of the game, and they work pretty well. Some of them do make the luck element a bit lower in some aspects, but at the same time, they themselves are not well balanced. Some are incredibly hard, some you'll barely notice at all. So it still kind of contributes to the overall swinginess of the game, but it is nice to have these. They do vary up your experience, and if you select them instead of randomizing them, you can really curate the exact way you want the game to play. My number 4 point is also a mix for my taste, and that's focused on the maneuvering around the board in the game. And on the one hand, it's very simplistic. Most of the heroes are only melee fighters, so they can just charge at the enemies if they want to fight them. And the enemy AI is also super simplistic. They just charge toward the closest person and attack. But to the game's credit, there are some interesting things you can do with that system, like trying to lead the enemy away from weaker characters, trying to set up little combos with your cards that are based on adjacency and such. And also a nice touch is that Doom is building up around the board in different ways in the two scenarios, and the way to get rid of it is to move next to it, and then you can remove tokens in different ways. So even when you're just kind of slugging it out and punching back and forth, the game still gives you reasons to move around slightly. My number 3 point, though, is generally a full pro for my taste, and that's the variety in the characters. So just in this cooperative set, you get 4 new characters for the Unmatched system, and they're pretty diverse in their abilities. And then if you want to, you can buy the many Unmatched characters that are already out, and they work with the system too. Although that's where my one caveat comes in. Even with the characters in this set, and more so with some of the characters from previous sets, because this is just being ported over from a competitive system to a cooperative one, there are some abilities that don't function quite the same way or are drastically different in power level. So it's not a perfect one-to-one port over, but still it works pretty impressively well. And again, even if you just get this set, the 4 characters are fun to experiment with. My number 2 point is the enemy activation and the turn structure in general. So first of all, there's some nice variety in the enemies. You have the 2 main bosses and the 2 main scenarios, but then you have a whole bunch of minions, and you use a number equal to the number of players, and they each have their own little unique characteristics and abilities. And their turns are super simple. They just charge towards you up to 3 spaces. You flip a card. They'll attack you for that amount. They might have an ability. It's all pretty easy to run. Now, on the negative side, though, these cards are one of the swingiest elements in the game, especially the Deception card, which is a 0/0. I've had games where I drew this really frequently because it shuffles their deck and it could end up near the top again. I've had games where it's been on the bottom, and that will drastically change the overall difficulty of the game, although there are event cards to mitigate that. And then another thing I don't love with the enemies and the game overall is the initiative system. This is basically straight out of Aeon's End, in that you're going to have a varied initiative activation order each game. And this is mainly a problem for me at higher player counts, just like Aeon's End. You can go early in one round and then very late in another round and have just a ton of downtime for what should be a very quick game. And also another potentially very swingy element, sometimes the enemies activating before you is going to drastically change your fortunes in the game, or if you activate before them and get a chance to kill them, those kind of things can definitely change up the difficulty. And finally, getting to my number 1 point, for my taste at least, this is a mix, and that's the core card play in the game. So you're taking 2 actions a turn, and most of them are going to use cards, and then the maneuver action lets you draw cards. And first of all, and this is a general complaint for my taste for Unmatched, not everyone's going to agree, but I don't like the card economy in Unmatched. You need to take movement actions to draw new cards. Often when you get very card poor, you'll spend your entire turn just moving twice to draw 2 more cards. I don't find that exciting or interesting at all. And then also the card balance, as I already mentioned, is pretty wonky in this mode because a lot of characters have like weaker attacks that are meant to sort of feel out your opponent in the competitive play, because in competitive you don't have to play a defense when somebody attacks you. But because here the enemy is always responding, always defending, often with a pretty high value unless they draw that one deception card, it just feels like, again, the balance of cards is off. But that being put aside, the combos between cards are exciting. This goes back to my point about the characters and their special abilities, the choices of when to play cards and when not to, and which values to use, and the variety between all the characters. That is a lot of fun. So again, it's not my favorite. I do wish cards came into your hand a little bit more easily, and sometimes the choices you have on your turn are a bit frustrating, but at the same time, it does have great variety and some cool tactical play if you dig into the game. So overall, I can recommend Unmatched Adventures if you already have Unmatched, because it's a great add-on and will take your existing content further. But if you've never played Unmatched before, you might want to check this out if you like light skirmish games, light dueling games, or just want to try out something with some fun character variety and nice cooperation between players. But on the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you want great balance right out of the gate, or if you don't like randomness, because with the card draw, things can definitely swing in drastically different directions. And if you want to see the game in action, I did a solo playthrough on the channel you can watch. Good gaming, everyone, and I'll see you at the next stop.